Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Hello! Yeah, this is Will here, and this is Werewolf the Podcast, episode 102. We are currently following Fen through his joining with his second human host, a Viking child named Thorstein. In this episode, Fenrir explains the reasoning for him being called Fenrir. You know, my wolf soul, my werewolf soul. You should follow us on social media for updates and more information about us and the show. The links to that stuff are down in the description. Why don't you join me on Twitter and Insanegram? The Facebook group has only been around a few months and is already full of lunatics. Literal lunatics in some cases. So join that. Oh, and this shit is free. I've not even taken on any sponsors because I've not liked any yet. If you've something extraordinary to promote, give me a shout. If I like it, I will promote it for free. According to the podcast stats, we're doing really well. Fuck knows how that happened. 102 on the Apple Podcasts fiction charts. What? Well, it's not true. I do know how it happened. Thank you to all of you listeners for listening, downloading, following, reviewing, and sharing. I've never really done any marketing, so it is really down to you. Oh, and the fact that the content is incredible, of course. So, here I hand over to the star of this episode, Fenrir, the Wolf Soul. I am Fenrir, a wolf soul that has befriended Will, and become part of him to allow us to become the werewolf and the wolf when required. Some of you may know me already as part of these silly stories that Will wishes to share for some unknown fucking reason. I don't get it myself. What does he get from telling you about us and how we look at life? I understand that some men need a legacy and to have some footnote on history's pages, but we're supposed to be unfound and out of knowledge of others' kinds than ourselves. It is a manner in which we have always protected ourselves from those that would wish us harm. If man knew that we lived, would he allow us to exist in obscurity? If the world's population knew that we were real as werewolves and that we hunted them as part of our diet, would humankind allow us to exist? I think not. Look at what you've done to other species that hunt or compete with you for resources. You destroy them or exclude it geographically so that it can cause you no harm. I will not go into a rant on your species here, as that has been attended to before in many other episodes of this fallacy which Will lives so much. He thinks that you'll come to a point where we will be accepted as your masters and betters, and that we will live alongside each other as compatriots. I think not. Werewolf kind would be hunted into destruction in some manner or other. After all, we are few. Less than 100 walk the earth, which is no competition compared to your billions. We should hide and feed like the wolves we are. Certain elements of the world know about our existence through our simple stupidity in the past. The government is aware of us, but they seem to want to keep us a pernicious secret. They don't want to frighten the public with werewolves. Starvation and war are enough at this moment in time. Anyway, right. The reason for this story. Many have asked why I'm called Fenrir. If my homeland is in Ural Mountains of Russia, why is that? My answer to those would be to tell you to mind your own fucking business. But Will, after constant annoyance, forced me through his not shutting the fuck up about it to tell you this story. Will is not the first human to be bound to me. You may know I've been around for a few centuries and have been part of many people's lives. You already know about the first, who was named Gennady. There are many stories about the binding of us, but when I was with him, I was not named. I just was. Wolves don't really have names in the true sense of the term, so I just was for many generations. I only took on a name when I felt that was the correct name for me, and that was after several centuries of waiting. I paired after leaving Gennady with many, one of whom was a Norseman. Yeah, I know you call them Vikings, but they're really Ostmen. In this century, ships went west instead of east from their home. For too many decades, the Norse had travelled east to Russ and further to raid and trade with those found there. As with any overused resource, pickings had become thin and hard fought for as too much was taken, and the pool of fish that once held many became overfished and poor. The Norse were farmers in most cases, but land they tilled was poor, and other ways needed to be found to get resources they needed as a group. Frankly, on top of that, they took a great pleasure in fighting, stealing, and Vikinginning. Viking means raiding. Norsemen would go Viking. They had terrific technology in ships for the time. They had ships that could traverse the worst the sea could throw at them, and they had keels with such shallow drafts that they could get deep inland through most river systems. The people themselves were also meant for war. They on average were also taller and broader than other populations around Europe and beyond at this time. The other beauty of this nation was the religion they followed, if you can call it that. It was all about respect and strength, a true meritocracy where the strong were seen as those worth respect. They did have the idea of the Drenger. A Drenger is a stone column that stands out at sea. It faces all that nature can throw at it and still stands. If it had consciousness, it would know that it would be only able to do this for a short length of time, but it did it anyway. The Vikings believed their people should be like this, that they should be able to stand against all thrown at them and suffer, but win as frequently as possible until failure. It was okay to fail in their eyes of this society, as long as you fought hard. I loved that. And it is what is missing in this century, where many people expect the world to give them safe passage. They fear stress and suffering, not knowing that it will make them a better person in the end. This time was my favourite time in all history. I'd found a genuine soul to bind with at this point. Many cannot deal with a binding. They break. But when you find the right soul, it blossoms when coupled with mine. I found a young child at the time. His name was Thorstein. His stories will come, I'm sure. I'm getting this now. Why would Will want to share? This is stuff you should know. You should know there's more to the world than your government and masters prescribe. So, having berated you with the knowledge you did not need to know, let me get on with the reasoning for my name, Fenrir. There are many gods in the Norse religion, and they're more human than gods in their manners. They make mistakes. They're not perfect beings. They're powerful, but they do not only do wonderful things or have the pretense of doing just wonderful things, they also do shit things. That's why I delight in them. They are only stories to me. I do not need to put faith in anything, but I think a good story can be the best teacher in its lessons. I am Fenrir because his story resonated with me. Loki was one of the Norse gods, and he was known to be a trickster, selfish and cruel. He found pleasure in doing unpleasant things and pitting others against each other. We're told that he was the son of Odin, but the reality is that he was not the son of Odin. Often, Loki is weirdly named Odin's friend, and as Odin's friend they had a lot in common, being the only oathbreakers in the Norse pantheon of gods. His actual father was Thorvaldsen, an ice giant, or an anti-god as we should know them. These anti-gods were known as the Jota, more on that later. Loki's mother was a goddess Loki. He had two brothers who are of little interest to me, to be honest. So go find out about them yourselves if you want any more knowledge. Loki was married to a beautiful goddess, Sigyn, in time himself, who bore Nari and Vali, 2 sons. Loki was something that, as a word and a description, I feel has so much power. He was a total cunt. He took so much pleasure in the misery of others. In falsehoods and lies he found fun. In causing strife in the worlds he found his most joy. However, all these things were done with the idea that they were done in fun, and not as an outcome, but as a process to stir the world into action. Loki, being more human as a Norse god, when he cheated on Sigyn, his first wife with Angrboda. He had 3 children with what we call the ice giants in the modern age. They weren't ice giants in the original sagas, but the anti-gods. Somehow they've been changed to the ice giants in this day and age. Maybe we have not, once acknowledged them as anti-gods, who knows? In the sagas they were the size and shape of the gods, just chaotic in nature. His 3 children were a mashup of horrors. Odin thought that they would be a source of trouble in the future and in the world, so he gathered them to deal with them in one place. El was a girl who was half dead and half alive. Odin cast her into a place that we would call the Land of Mists. In the sagas it's called Niflheim. Odin, not beyond playing the tricks for himself, which probably made him value Loki, played a trick on her to get her to take residence there. He told her that she would have mastery over the 9 worlds, but could not visit them. Once there, she found that her only mastery was on those that she had to take from other worlds, those that died poorly in Viking eyes. For example, those dying of old age and illness. As you can imagine, there was not the mastery she thought she would obtain, so Ellie's a bit of a miserable bitch, to be honest. I always wondered which half of her was dead and which half was alive. Was it lower and upper bodies, or was she split longitudinally down the centre? The second child of Loki was Jormungandr, a gigantic serpent. Now, when we say gigantic, we're going to the larger scale of what that means. He was thrown into sea by Odin, where he encircles Midgard and holds back the seas by forming a circle where his body is the barrier. And he maintains the circle by holding his tail in his teeth, and you think you've got a tedious job. Imagine that. Now we get to Fenrir, Loki's 3rd son with Angrboda. Fenrir is a big black fuck-off wolf, so you may see why I like him immediately. An almost god that was a big fuck-off wolf. How cool is that? He's also as black as myself. His pelt was darker than midnight. Fenrir means fen dweller, but he's also known as Rovitna or Fame Wolf, and why not? He deserves fame like no other. The reasons will become apparent as I explain. Now Odin had been given some knowledge of his and all the gods' fate. The end of the world was coming, known as Ragnarok. He was told that the wolf was trouble and that he would have to be controlled to stop the world's premature end. Fenrir started as a usual tiny little pup, but grew exponentially. He began to grow to giant proportions and ate all, having his appetite linked to that of a fire. As in myself, when he was first brought into the world, he was somewhat innocent and sweet. He trusted those around him, that they would care for him. He was very wrong. As he grew, the gods worried and got stressed while pretending to be kind and loving just in case he kicked off. Only Tyr, the bravest of them, would now feed him because of the fear he generated in him. When he got to a size that scared Odin, he ordered that the wolf had to be bound. When they told Fenrir that they would tie him up, he wondered why. He did not understand why they would want to take away his freedom, and none of the gods could explain, except Odin. Odin told him it was a test to see how strong he was, and that he would get great fame if he broke the bonds that held him. The first fetter was called Lading, and was extremely strong, but Fenrir looked at it and thought it would be easy to break, so he let them bind him. When they'd finished tying the giant wolf, the gods sat back and thought they'd done a marvellous job, and that he would not offer any more problems. Fenrir, however, smiled, thinking that this was his moment to escape, and kicked one rear leg with little effort, tearing the chain to pieces and shocking the gods, who feigned excitement and wonder at his escape. From this point, Fenrir went on feeding and growing, and the gods were getting increasingly worried that he would soon become an issue, so another binding was ordered. This one was Dromi, and it was promised as the strongest chain that the worlds had ever made to date. Fenrir was asked to test his strength against this fetter, and at first he did not want to, but was convinced by the manipulating gods that if he could break the strongest chain ever made, that he would gain much fame. Much fame would bring him many friends, which he did not have, as all feared the giant wolf except Tyr. Lonely Fenrir wanted to have friends and company, so he looked at the chain thinking that he could probably break it, but got the gods to promise that if he could not, that they would let him go. They bound him and encircled him while the giant wolf struggled to rid himself of the tie. When it looked like he was beaten, the gods became self-congratulatory and merry. They celebrated the fact that he was stuck. This pissed off Fenrir, who went to vast lengths to break the chain. When he eventually did, to the horror of the gods present, they again congratulated the wolf, telling him how incredible he was and how his fame would spread. But Fenrir had an idea that the gods were not being truthful. So he went along with their nonsense. His mind always changed about their fairness and their trustworthy natures. Odin himself was now frightened. He was frightened that the strongest chain he could possibly find could not defeat the wolf. What would he do? He could never bind the wolf to stop him from bringing about the end. He also could not change fate by killing the wolf. So what could he do? After discussing the problem with the other gods, he realised that just because it had been the strongest fetter didn't mean a stronger one could not be made. He sent word to the dwarves, asking them to make something that could bind Fenrir. The dwarves were true masters of engineering and knew that they would have to imbue the constraint with more than worldly materials, so they added 6 further ingredients to Gleipnir, the new binding, to make it more potent than any before. They added the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of the mountains, the sinews of the bear, and the breath of the fish, the spittle of the birds. They created a ribbon. It was just that. It looked like it was made from a strand of silk and would have no strength compared to those that Fenrir had already broken. The gods summoned Fenrir to an island where they tried to convince him that he should test himself against Gleipnir. He remembered his last escape and how gods had acted when they thought he could not get free, so he was pretty unsure. Also, the band that they offered looked weak and pathetic, so what fame would he gain from breaking such a weak-looking thing? It looks to me that with this ribbon as though I will gain no fame from it. Even if I do tear it apart, it is such a slender band. But if it is made with art and trickery, then even if it does look thin, this band is not going on my legs, he told the gods. The problem was, Fenrir was not used to flattery, and the gods flattered him. A wee bit of peer pressure helped as well, as the gods changed tact and agreed that it looked paltry compared to Dromi and Lipnig. So if it could hold him, he deserved no fame, and they would not be scared of him anymore, and they'd release him. Fenrir was still relatively innocent. If you bind me so that I cannot release myself, then you will be standing by in such a way that I should have to wait a long time before I get any help from you. I am reluctant to have his band put on me, but rather than that, you question my courage. I tell you what, let someone put his hand in my mouth as a pledge that this is done in good faith, Fenrir asked. As you can imagine, none of the gods wanted to lose an hand, so they all refused, and Fenrir laughed at them and was about to tell them to fuck off when Tyr, who was nice to Fenrir, came up. He had treated Fenrir well, and he knew he would have to do it to delay Ragnarok, so Tyr offered his hand to the wolf as he was bound. Fenrir admired Tyr, so he gently held Tyr's hand as he struggled to escape from Gleipnir. The struggling that Fenrir did caused the binding to get tighter and tighter, and the gods found his struggles really funny as they laughed and made mirth at his failure to escape. Tyr knew what was coming, but bravely held his hand in the wolf's mouth just as he promised, not wanting to show weakness by removing it from the wolf's grasp, which he could have easily done. Fenrir felt hate for the first time, and knew how to teach the gods a lesson. He bit the hand from Tyr and saw that the other gods still laughed, even in the face of the hurt that he had created on Tyr. They did not care about Tyr losing his hand, they only cared that Fenrir was bound. At that moment, he lost his faith and gained the hate of all the gods, the hatred that he would need for him to bring about Ragnarok. The gods had created it in Fenrir themselves. The gods then buried him in a cave at the root of the mountains, where they tied him to 2 giant stones and tried to leave. Fenrir snapped at passing gods, trying to bite and kill them, so one of the cowards sword gagged him by placing a sword vertically in his jaws, the hilt in the bottom jaw and the point in the upper jaw. And that was how he was left to howl and struggle for all time. The waterfall that comes from that cave is supposed to be hope. The saliva that runs from Fenrir's mouth is hope. The gods thought that they had delayed their fate that day, which they had, but they'd only delayed it. They'd also created a reason for Fenrir to harm them. Before this betrayal, he had no reason to bring an end to those he classed as friends. Now it was all he wanted to do, and it poisoned his mind. Had the gods been fooled? Well, fate is fate, so it's bound in time to happen, but it seems so. If they'd offered care and friendship, maybe Ragnarok would have been delayed much longer. So as you can see, this story and my own have much in common. The name Fenrir was appropriate for me for 2 reasons. It allowed my acceptance by Thorstein, the Viking child, to become my host. His religion was important to him, and he now had a reason to join me. 2. I hate humans and werewolves alike. I'm here to bring an end to all. I will bring about Ragnarok, a Ragnarok level event myself. I look forward to ending the world. Well, thanks to Happy Fenrir there. Thank you for your input. As I said before, do stuff in the description. It's dead good. There's loads of things happening. The podcast is going from strength to strength, and I just have to thank everyone who's listening, because I didn't think this little niche culty podcast would get big. I was just doing it for fun. But thanks very much, everyone. Love you very much. Great. Bye.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.